So let's take a look at this initial line drawing. Now this is a lot simpler a line drawing than what we've used before. This is a relatively quick sketch, which I'm going to go through how I arrived at this stage, and then we'll add a little bit more in. But the reason that I want to keep it relatively simple and clean is because we're taking that more sketchy approach. And if I put too many details in, that's going to make things a little bit too contrived. I'm going to be too caught up in all of the details and getting things really accurate. And it's also just that much more time consuming because effectively I'm doing the drawing twice. So this took me about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to draw, and it was drawn by eye from the reference next to it. Always a lot easier, as I've said before, if you're drawing size for size. If your reference photograph is smaller or larger and you've got to adjust that size, it just takes a little bit more time to make those comparative measures that we've talked about in other courses. So where did I start? Well, as ever, with the focal point. So the tram was just drawn in as a basic shape. There's no perspective going on here with this tram because it's looking straight at us. So it was a basic rectangle drawn in, and then from there it's very easy to put the shapes on top of that and within it to create the front of the tram. The next step then was to create the buildings, or just a very basic framework for the buildings. So there's no windows in there, there's just the top levels, the bottom levels, and the levels in between. So 1 point perspective, I didn't even bother putting a vanishing point in. So all I did was look at what the rough bottom line of the buildings would be, place the pencil down and drew that line in. Same for the top line, you can just about see some of it here. Place that in, and then all I've done is looked for the level. So there's a level of the building there with a set of windows in, there's a level here and here, and that's all I wanted to give an indication of. And then I've put a few verticals in just to depict where the start and end of each particular building is. Same on the other side. So a little bit more intricate round here, but again, I haven't put any sort of details in. I've not tried to put any of the windows in here or any of the bits and pieces that are around because it is really, really intricate. And then from there, the two elements that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on, just because they can potentially be quite tricky, especially if you draw them with ink and you don't get that second chance to erase. The two elements were the figures and the cars. So I've started to put the figures in there. I haven't put any in here. I'm going to come on to those in a second so you can see me draw those in. I've put the two cars in here. There is another one, but it's small enough that I'll draw that in straight with the ink pen. What I think you might find useful though is just to see how I went about drawing this car. So if we just make a little bit of space for ourselves, because we don't need any of this, just erase that back on the right hand side. So the first shape that I looked at was the windscreen. And it's an easy shape to put in. It's easy to get the size correct as well. Put that windscreen in there. And then the next piece is to put in the registration plate. And the reason for that is that it just, one, the registration plate is very indicative and will tell you that it's a car, along with the wing mirrors, which you'll see in a moment. But it just starts to give you a better idea of the proportions. And then from there, I want to look at the lights. So these nice big lights, this is going to be a Mercedes car, again, very indicative of that brand. So I can put the lights in, and I'm just looking, they are slightly above the number plate, and the curvature just about follows the line of the outside of the windscreen. You can quickly look where the bottom of them fall, and they're just a relatively simple triangle. Okay, and then next step, just look at that bumper line, put that in there, and then the bottom of the bumper, we can put that in as well, and just look at the way the bumper here curves this way and in here, so it's that bucket shape at the bottom, slight curved edge around the back. And then for the wheels, well, all of this is in shadow, so that makes life a little bit easier, but for the undercarriage and wheels, I'm just looking, I can see this negative shape of light. So all I'm doing is initially just aiming to recreate that negative shape of light. I'm not worried about trying to draw an accurate underbody of the car or even the shadow. I start with that abstract shape. So now I'm just looking at how all of this shadow area goes into one, so I don't need to worry too much about the detail there. For the wheel on this side, again, it's all going into the shadow, but it's just a basic outline shape. It's no wheel of any description. Now that gives you the back of the car. At the moment, it looks like it's driving straight away from us. So how do we make it look like it's driving into the distance off at an angle? Because that's really the only difficult part of drawing a vehicle like this. Well, if you've got your construction lines in or a few of those guidelines in, it becomes that much easier. So if I put another line in going from roughly where a vanishing point might be, and we take it through to there, and then we take one that would be maybe around the top of the vehicle, somewhere around that area there. All I've got to do now is just look at the length. So that the length from the back to the front. Now that idea of foreshortening, which again, if you're not sure about that, go back to the Drawing Essentials course, give yourself a quick refresher. But this idea of foreshortening tells us that this is a very, very short distance. Even though in reality, the length of the car is much longer than the width of the car, because of the perspective, this is a very short distance. So I can see the distance from here to, say, the light, for example, is only probably about a quarter of the distance or quarter of the width at the back of the car. So if we say a quarter is about there, we can put the front of the car in somewhere around that region. And all I'm doing now is just doing a slight oval for the front wheel. It's touching the perspective line that runs through. This is actually probably needs to be a little bit lower. It touches the perspective line that this back wheel touches, and then for the front, just a bit of a curve because that is going to be described by the windows when we put those in. We put the top of the car in, let's make that windscreen slightly smaller. Now, I said that the registration plate was sort of really indicative of the car. The other thing is the wing mirrors. So as soon as you put a wing mirror in, it sort of makes everything come together. So we just put a wing mirror in here. And then there's be one on the opposite side sticking out. Your windows, when you put them in with, if you do it in pencil with, some dark shading, or with ink as we'll be doing, again, they will give you all the details that you need for the side of the car. And it's as simple and as complicated as that. As you get further into the distance, they become that much easier because they become more abstract as they get further away. Now, like the cars, the figures on the left-hand side probably need a little bit more forethought before you go straight in with ink, unless you're really, really confident. And the way that I've drawn these in is not that much different to the way that we drew the figures in the London scene, if you remember that one. So I've got some here in the distance that I put in, and remember their head heights are all roughly the same. Obviously, people are different heights. Some people are smaller than others, and you've got children, really tall people. This chap here is probably really tall. So your figures in the distance there, in the foreground, sorry, their head heights will be slightly different, but roughly you can see that they're all on this horizon line. Now, the figures in the distance, they'll become very, very impressionistic. We don't need to worry about those. But before anyone calls me up on this head height rule, the figures' heads are a lot higher here. It's because the actual pavement curves up. So this is on this road here is on a hill, and these people here are on a different level than these people. So that's the reason for that. But just notice how people on the same level, all their heads are the same height. So as we get throughout this drawing and we come to populate some figures, just make that quick check. So I said that the figures in the foreground, the way that I created them wasn't too much different to the way we created the smaller figures back in the London scene. And the way that I did that was, first of all, look, where's the top of the head? Where do I want the bottom of the feet to be? And then what is a halfway mark? So this gentleman's belt is roughly halfway, slightly higher than halfway. So if I make a mark that's slightly higher than halfway, right away I've got a much better chance of creating something that is in reasonable proportion. I can then look at the bottom of the shorts. That's around about halfway again. So halfway between the distance here and here, and put those in. Of course, it doesn't matter if you're out too much because shorts can be of a different length. And then it's a case of just drawing in some basic shapes. So this main torso area is a rectangle, and I'm looking for the lean of that rectangle. That's the most important part of his particular pose. And then his head is just a sphere. you know, and just looking at the size of the sphere compared to this rectangle, leaving a little bit of a gap, which is where his collar would be. I can put in a small shape. I did for, it's either a phone he's holding or a cup of coffee, it looks like. And then from there, it's very easy to put the arm in, to put this arm in as well. The legs, you can look at the negative shape between them, so this triangle shape here, and that will help you get the distance between the legs so that they're not too wide and not too narrow. And then for the actual width of them, just remember that as long as you taper them, so long, thin triangles, particularly for somebody that's in shorts, then you're going to be fine. The feet, again, the way that you make feet look like they don't just look like two triangles plonked onto the bottom of a pair of legs. If you just take this angle out here, so the angle comes down here through the leg and the back of the heel just goes out ever so slightly. If you draw it straight down, that's when it tends to look a little bit funny. And it's amazing what just taking that angle out does in terms of the believability of the pose. Now, once you've got your first figure in, it becomes easier then to put subsequent figures in because you can use this as a reference point. You can look at sizes, proportions comparative to each other. So the next chap I did was this one here. Again, same sort of approach, top of the head, bottom of the feet, halfway mark, basic rectangle if you want, if you need to do that for the arm there. And then the head, just looking again, what the size of the head is. We've got a bit more of a gap for the neck. There's a bit more of his neck showing. And then this figure here, very, very simple because it's just a series of abstract shapes. You can't really go wrong with this figure here. We've got the chap in the back who, it's just a head really, but what you want to do is just spend a little bit of time putting a mark in for the eye, and it's just a dash, and then a slight angled mark for the nose, and then a line for the chin. And what that will do is it gives you the very basic proportions of a face, and that's all you need for it to be realistic or for it to be believable. If you don't do that and you try and put them in, it's quite easy with pen and you get it wrong, it's quite easy to put the eye too high up, you know, right in the top of the forehead, for the nose to be too far down. And with a figure this size, it's not going to take a lot, very, very small distances for you to be out where it doesn't look right. So if you play about with the pencil, use your eraser until it looks right, until it looks like the proportions are roughly correct, and then leave it at that. So the next figure that I need to put in is this little girl here. It looks like she's being held by somebody. So because I've got this gentleman in here, it's quite easy for me to use that as a reference. So the way I'm going to do this one, first of all, is to just draw in the little girl's hair. So just draw in a hairline there. And then, like I said with this gentleman here, so I'm looking for where's the eye line, where's the angle of the nose, angle of the face there. See, it really doesn't look anything at all. We neaten it up with the pen, but it's just enough to give me the confidence that when I put the pen marks in, it's going to be reasonably accurate. So we've got our arm that comes around here, the sleeve over, bit of a top showing through there, and then it looks like, I don't know if that's something in front, maybe an arm in front, but her leg then is coming out here. So I'm just looking, where does it intersect this gentleman's leg? Her foot is right on the back there, okay? And that's all I need for that little girl there. So then, last person, let's just put this lady in here. So I'm just gonna look at the height of her head. You can maybe look at this angle here, the way that that goes around, and then that will give you the position of that person's head. I'm putting in a circle, a sphere, and then she's got a ponytail. So that's gonna be quite easy to put in there. And then her shoulder, she's got this black dress on. And then this bit in here is all just bits and pieces of nothing that we can't really make out, so we can leave that for now. Just tidy that bit up there. And there's another head in there, I think. Okay, so that's all you need to put in for the figures. The only other thing that you may want to put in, I've put a couple of them in, are a few key markers. So I've got these two signposts here, I've got a light here, just a few of these key markers just to help you get your bearings as you're working throughout the drawing. Again, you don't want to put too much in because that is going to restrict the speed at which you work, and it's going to force you to become a little bit too accurate and too concerned with accuracy. So I could put maybe this light in here. So just looking at an angle there, where's this light roughly? It's about this, above this car, about on that line. So I'm going to say it's somewhere around here. So I'm not worried if it's not exact. Okay, and that gives me another little marker. I'm not even going to put this one in, or the other one on the other side. I'm confident that I can put those in with the pen.